Boom, I'm going.
Boom, I'm going.
I'm on.
Welcome back. Cool. Well, yeah. Hey
Do you want
guys.
to kick it off, Clay? Just give a summary of the movie, or just like why we even did this. Why did we watch why do we watch Contagion?
Okay. Hello everybody. Welcome back to Chums. This is the second episode of our inaugural season. For this episode, we decided to watch and unpack the film Contagion. It was in 2011, filmed or directed by Steven Soderbergh, and it's a film that depicts kind of the beginning initial virus spreading of like a fictitious virus and ends with the initial vaccine deployment. So it hits on where the virus started, where it's going, how it spreads, where it spreads, and it kind of varies in characters as far as touches on CDC executives, CDC detectives, middle-class individuals, lower-class individuals, from all different points across the world, conspiracy theorists, and really touches how all these different people play into a pandemic occurring. Really interesting, strikes a lot of fear throughout the movie. It's a suspense film, a thriller, if you will. There's a little bit of gore in it, but the overall point of the film was to kind of build suspense around this invisible enemy, which is the virus. So yeah, that was Contagion, and what we plan on doing is unpacking that a little bit. Why we watched that, not too sure why. We just wanted to. I think sign of the times. We were interested in viruses in particular, maybe getting a little bit more acclimated with them, but also how people react and how people choose to act in the midst of a virus occurring. So that's why we watched it. I would love to kind of field some initial reactions. I think one word that I would say is like just fear. Like I was really scared, for sure. I think, it was just it's a virus that's a lot, the fictitious virus in this film is a lot bigger than really any virus. And it's a movie, it has to be. But it was definitely scary for sure. So
I'm kind of curious how long the term social distancing has been around, because they use social distancing in that film too, and part of me thought it was just a coin that was termed, or a term that was coined, recently, but it sounds like it's been around. Also, honestly, it kind of made me think about how, social distancing, obviously it has its effectiveness, but one of the first things that the movie does is just show you how many different things and people you touch, talk with, and interact with in every moment of every day. And so it almost portrayed this inevitability of the spread because of how we interact with everything and touch everything.
Yeah, that was what stuck out to me most was this almost seems like a study in predictability. Like seeing a lot of these things in the movie make you realize just how predictable this was. And so I kind of looked into Soderbergh and what he did in terms of developing this, because I was like, how the heck did he get this much right? Like obviously he didn't just sit down and make this up. So he researched a disease that spread throughout Malaysia in the 1990s, and it came from bats, and that's where he got it coming from bats, which is interesting how you hear a lot of theories about corona coming from bats. And anyways, he looked at a lot of what the scientists, how they were dealing with that 1990s thing. I think that's where he got the term social distancing. And then even stuff like, you heard them talk about don't touch your face. Like we're hearing that a lot today, and this movie kind of almost like foretold scientists saying that, and how at first when someone tells you not to touch your face, you're just like, what are you talking about? And then it's now just like an accepted thing to not touch your face. And so one of the things that Soderbergh said stuck out to him and made him, he said at first he wanted this to be like a Hunger Games, where it was like dystopia, but it would never happen, right? Like this entertaining dystopia. But then as he did research, he started to notice the tone from the medical community was actually something along the lines of, when there is a global epidemic, here's what's going to happen. Here are the things that we can predict. It wasn't if there's a global pandemic. It like there was almost consensus among the people who studied this that it was going to happen. So he was like, okay, I'm just going to make a film that tries to like foretell and play out as much of this as possible. So it's just kind of eerie seeing that play out. Even like the government, how there's that tension between people are like, oh, we don't need to freak out, and oh my gosh, we should really freak out. And there's the government acting too late, is acting too early, all those questions. You see that tension there.
Yeah. One question that we didn't even get to, or the film didn't address, I should say, was the economic effects.
Yeah.
Because it talked very much, it really just covered the spread of the virus and the fear of the virus. But I think a competing fear for our culture right now is the side effects of social distancing and canceling lots of things for virus prevention, having economic effects that might actually be worse than the social distancing and the impact of the virus itself. And so that's kind of interesting that there's a competing fear right now.
Yeah, they're kind of at odds with each other for sure. I think they definitely didn't hit on like the economic value, but they definitely hit on. I think there were points where there was like there were certainly class struggles, and knowledge was power was spread throughout this film. Like the CDC executive likely had more power in this scenario than the president. The president was protected, sure, but knowledge truly is power, and knowing when things are going to happen is key. And not sharing that information with the public really, I think, established a unique class struggle that kind of freaked me out, which was, what do we as the American people not know? What is it that like potentially could be kept from us to either protect other people or to protect us in a way, right? Do we really want to know like the realities of this? Is that going to drive us to the grocery stores to raid everything faster, right? So I think that's a big takeaway for me, is also the absence of, I didn't notice the absence of the economics as much, but I did notice the idea of the class struggle. So
yeah, it's interesting how there's almost 3 levels of truth to it. There's whatever is absolutely true about how severe this is, and then there's the government's understanding of how severe this is, and then there's what the government communicates to the people about how severe it is. And those are 3 very different truths, and it's hard to stay sane knowing that those are 3 very different things.
I wonder if it could also help us have some grace for those who are in authority, who are like, if we give everyone the benefit of the doubt, even though there's a high distrust of authority right now, that like there's, they don't know everything either. And so they're trying to make decisions day to day, kind of like we are in our day to day, where it's just confusing. Man, leadership is hard.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that scene where like Jude Law and Laurence Fishburne, I forget their character names, but they have that debate or whatever, and as viewers we see Laurence Fishburne as a very honest guy, but then the conspiracy theorist has all of these like harsh criticisms of like, you're not telling us everything, you're acting dishonestly. And it's the same thing. Like, it's easy for us to be like, the government knows the whole truth and we just got to get it out of them, when a lot of people in the government are just like, I have no idea what's going on. Like we beg them to like, tell us how many people are going to die. Please predict exactly how bad this will be. How many people are going to lose their jobs? And, it's like, if the government is God, then maybe they can tell you that. But if they're separate from God, then they don't know those things.
Mm-hmm.
So did this movie, this is a funny question I thought of. Does it seem this movie almost predicts like the Alex Jones type character?
Yeah, I would say so. I think Jude Law, I assume you're talking about Jude Law's character. So Jude Law is the conspiracy theorist on this show or in this movie, and he finds a plant-based solution that works to prevent cures you of the virus. When I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't it end up killing people, and that's why he ended up going to jail or something?
Well, it's that people trust it, and then the official who is like had to be put in jail is like, hey, like you're gonna be convicted for manslaughter because people are trusting your word over getting the vaccine, and like you're at fault because there's no proof that this does anything.
Yeah, he was trying to just capitalize off of the fear and the confusion and try to overplay everyone's inherent mistrust of leadership, and obviously it ends up backfiring on him.
Yeah, I would have to say, yeah, I think this definitely kind of predicted or at least shed light on the conspiracy theorist Alex Jones persona.
Yeah, it is interesting too, though, that the conspiracy theorist guy. So when he's Jude Law is in the debate with Laurence Fishburne, like accuses him of some things that are true. Like he kind of pieces some pieces of evidence together that are true. Turns it into a different story. But like Laurence Fishburne did like call and tell, a loved one with privileged information that you got to get out of town right now.
Yeah, and he was the first one. When there's that video of like one person reacting to this disease, he's like, this is big, this is a big deal. And everyone was like, you're just a blogger trying to get attention, and so he was like the first one to like realize the severity of this. So there is that like element of, he is bringing this truth to the table. So he's certainly an ambiguous character, some good, some bad.
Yeah, I think the idea of like following. So nowadays we have like Twitter, social media, all these different things. Depending on the number of followers you have, really depicts your audience, and that doesn't necessarily have to identify your class. There are some everyday people who become Twitter famous. That's not a very common thing, but you can have tons of followers, and with that you have the power to say what you like and to really kind of put your opinions out there. And so I think that's a really key thing. Yeah, the conspiracy theorist did say a lot of true things, but he certainly abused his power with his blog, like near the end of the film when it came to hear that what he was trying to push with Forsythia was actually like affecting people very, very negatively.
Yeah.
So I think power is like a really interesting thing I took away. It's just very distributed, in cases like this, in the scope of a virus.
So let's kind of take things in a little bit different direction. And I think it's applicable. There are two things that I think the film does well to display that like every individual personally feels, and then how those things collectively can come together. Fear was obviously a huge one. Grief was another, like the loss of things. And I kind of want to touch on grief first, because I think there's certainly fear, but I think it's not as comprehensive as it is in the movie for us right now. And so maybe this idea of grief, like, you know, one of the things that everybody was experiencing was great loss. And so whether it was family members that were dying, Matt Damon's character, man, this movie is star-studded randomly. But like Matt Damon's character, his wife is like the first one to know, or one of the first ones to die from the virus. And it's a complete stunner to him. And then in the midst of that, he finds out that she was cheating on him, and he loses his son. And so in the midst of all that, like, he's experiencing so much loss and like just melts down, you know, once, but then has to go into survival mode in order to try to save his daughter's life and protect her. And then it's not until the very end of the movie that it ends with him kind of giving her and her boyfriend a chance at a prom dance that they had missed. And then he actually sits down and starts flipping through photos of Gwyneth Paltrow, his late wife. And man, it like draws on so much, like, you know, those who actually have family members that are, you know, get sick from COVID and, you know, might die or do, or the high school kid, like his daughter, who is missing out on her entire, you know, rest of her high school career. Maybe high school seniors out there, like, or college seniors. High school, she missed her prom. You know, things that you look forward to sometimes your whole life. Graduations, proms, athletic like events and seasons that you've trained for, that you spent time with, that you place so much hope and you look forward to in a lot, are kind of taken away, and everybody is mourning the loss of something.
Yeah, I find it interesting how like, as far as like the way the disease sets in, like you look at the way Matt Damon and Gwyneth Paltrow, the two of them, the way they like interact, and they just think it's like sickness and it's not like a big deal, and then boom, she's having a seizure. But then even once he has a seizure, Matt Damon is still like, oh, let's treat her for this seizure and then she'll be fine. So there's all this like confusion. And that same thing happens, you know, when they zoom out and look at the global scale. When, you know, scientists are like, 4 people in Minnesota have this, people are just like, oh, that's cute. And, you know, so don't touch your face. It's like, why are you telling people not to touch their face? 4 people have this disease in all of Minnesota. And then boom, suddenly the next scene, there's like 8 million people have this, you know? So it's that anticipation that, and then when it finally sets in is similar. And then as you were talking about the grief afterwards, it's like there's so much like tension, like finding out she was cheating on you makes it really hard to like properly grieve, and makes it at least really confusing. And then you have a daughter you need to care for, and you know, you look at like the nation as a whole, that same like you think of like, how is America going to recover from this virus that we're going through? You know, like certainly there's a lot of like political tension coming from this. There's going to be a lot of ways where it's going to be hard for us to grieve as a country, because we just want to have debates about how can people get their jobs back, how, you know, all these political issues, as opposed to just coming together as a country and mourning and coming out of this stronger, you know?
Yeah. I mean, even you saying that makes me think of business owners who have lost businesses.
Yeah.
Another grief.
Yeah, I think the I don't know if it was mentioned last time, but this is the ultimate equalizer. This virus is bringing everyone to an equal playing field. This virus certainly doesn't has different impacts economically and you know, physically, but it is the ultimate equalizer in the fact that it doesn't stop based on your class or based on you know, whatever thing, you know, your religious views. It attacks all the same way. And I think everyone certainly has lost things in different ways. Like I think, Young Life College for the rest of the semester, or being able to like get out of our houses. For me, it was like my wedding, and recently I found out it was my internship too. And these are all things that I think, for me at least, I haven't directly mourned it, or it hasn't hit me fully yet, because we're still just in this mode of, I think for me, we're kind of, where I exist at least, is I'm in a constant mode of busyness, and resting isn't something that I do well. And so because of that, I'm always on to the next thing. I can't worry about what just happened. And so in the scope of my internship, I found, I had to say, okay, I can't really mourn this right now. I got to figure out what I'm going to do instead, and then kept moving. But I think, I think nobody's going to walk out of this untouched in different capacities. But we haven't been hit fully yet.
Good. I was going to say, it makes it harder to properly mourn or properly get sympathy from other people, because it's like, whoever you're complaining to, it's like, oh, I lost my job, and they're like, well, I lost my grandma. It's like everyone, this is hitting right at home. So it's like people are starting to run low on sympathy and empathy, because it's like everybody is going through this so hard. Whereas 2 months ago, if you lose your mom in a car crash, then there's going to be a lot of people available to help you and connect with you, and that's almost gone now.
What do you guys think it looks like right now to grieve those things that we've lost, or the things that have been changed?
I mean, certainly a lot of the changes have been, I think, for a lot of people, negative. And so thinking on those things is a hard thing to do. But for me, I think there are some people, I would have said 2 weeks ago, this didn't really hit home for me. 2 weeks ago, I thought we were still having a wedding. It was going to be like 50 people, and that was going to be fine with us. And then found out my internship too. And so to grieve those properly, I think I have to understand what's actually happening, and then take those directly to the Lord, which I think was my immediate response when some of that knowing about the wedding had like caused Lauren and I to kind of struggle a little bit, and trying to figure out what we're going to do, and cause some tension. So that I knew that my grief and my mourning had to be known to myself, because I hadn't like fully accepted it or known it fully. And so in order for that to happen, I had to take that to the Lord and spend time in solitude, kind of alone, which luckily we can find alone time pretty easily nowadays.
Yeah, I definitely relate. You said it this way, that you have you have a constant to-do list and are being distracted. Like you're constantly doing something else, and in some ways that's helpful to avoid the grief. And there's a healthy manner of, you don't want to dwell on things too much, but to actually stop and realize what we've lost and actually grieve it. We have to stop. We have to stop distracting and actually think about it, actually remember what it was going to be, what was, remember the good things of the year, remember the hard things of the year, and then just be sad. Like, it's okay to be sad. We treat sadness as like such an evil thing.
It's taboo. Yeah.
It can be actually good to be sad. Ecclesiastes in the Bible actually tells us it's better to be in the house of mourning, M-O-U-R-N, the house of mourning, than a house of mirth, than pleasure. Better to be in a house of grief than a house of pleasure. That sadness of the face makes the heart glad.
Interesting. Clay, it's interesting, like you answered it about like personal mourning, and I mean, I guess to speak to that, I feel like it's almost the American attitude of like, we're all stuck at our homes, and now everyone's like, let's find fun ways to keep ourselves busy at home. It's like this like challenge, like, okay, now what are some new things I can do to always stay busy? But what I first thought about it, because I, like no one in my family's lost their job. I don't, I'm not getting married or anything. So I don't have a lot of like personal like mourning to do. Like I don't have these terrible things I'm going through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I'm actually quite enjoying spending time at home with my wife, just hanging out.
Yeah.
And so like as I think about it, it's almost um like my role as someone who's like feeling very healthy through this is I'm one thing I'm doing is I'm trying to connect with people on social media and stuff like that. And so what I shouldn't do is go to social media or hang out with friends, reach out to someone like you and
Mm-hmm.
just be this like cheery, optimistic, like, hey, this is great. We can make the most of these times. Things will be all really fun and hunky dory and like just put all over Instagram these big old smiles and make sure
Yeah.
everyone's happy. Because as a Christian, that's not our role. Our role isn't to bring optimism, or well, we can bring optimism, but our goal isn't to bring like false cheeriness into a time of mourning. It's like
Yeah.
we actually, as people who base our lives off the gospel, like we are prepared to suffer for the gospel, and we have a theological grounding to speak into these moments, not by just pretending that we should be really cheerful through all of it, but instead, like, we're prepped to meet people where they're at as they mourn.
Yeah. I think
It says we have less than a minute left, so
now, yeah, it's recording. So if you want to just like summarize what you said real quick.
let me think. Um, so as Christians, our role is not to put on a big fake smile and try to cheerlead everyone through this. Instead, we need to go into our psychological and theological depth that we're grounded upon and use that to speak into these times of suffering and grief.
Yeah. And I think I totally agree with you in the fact that there's a difference between uh, like optimism and like blind hope.
Yeah, naive optimism is not a virtue.
Hmm. I think hope is certainly something that we all should be able to manifest, but it's the question is, okay, where are we with hope, with faith, with optimism? It all has to be grounded in something. And so the question is, okay, where are you grounding that? And if I'm honest, I think some of my hope is that a vaccine is coming around the corner. So my
Yeah,
hope is in like scientists that can like that we can produce something that we can get rid of this virus. But
yeah,
is that righteous? And I think I think partly I'd have to say no because my hope should be grounded in the Almighty, that He has said what He has said, and that what He said is true. And so there are many truths in the Bible, but one of them is that we will endure suffering, and that suffering can produce perseverance,
mm.
draw us closer to the Lord in a kind of cool way of like sanctification. Um, but
Yeah,
hope, right? You know.
yeah, it's one thing about Contagion is that as they were looking for a cure for this virus, it took them a while, and then it took like an act of heroism for them to actually find it. And so that was kind of terrifying because it seems like everyone's just assuming like, oh, 12 to 18 months we'll get a vaccine. They'll come up with a vaccine for sure, as though like science makes it this sure thing that we will all be saved by some scientist, right? And that was where I realized like it's kind of terrifying that that really isn't guaranteed. And so it's like I guess proper awe and reverence of God is realizing that, hey, if he wants this virus to be around for 3 or 4 years or 10 years or whatever, there's no way any scientist can stop him and go against that. But at the same time, proper worship of God is realizing that like through all this suffering, he can make his will be done. And so that's optimistic. That's optimistic because it says, look, I believe in a God who is more powerful than the evil powers in this world. But it's not naive because it also says, hey, things could get really bad for a really long time.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing is within God's will. Well, for one, we don't like know what that fully entails, right? But what that could entail, and I think one thing that draws people away and draws people to their own conclusions instead of relying on the Lord, is that God's will could entail your death, or could entail suffering for you and those that you love. And so many people choose, because the Christian lifestyle is kind of a dose of reality in a sense. Many people, as they do, and I fall into this category too with busyness. We all have these idols in our lives that draw us away from mourning, from grieving, and from facing the reality of this virus. And I think this virus has its sufferings that are not okay. I think death is not fun to deal with, and to deal with it in a way that you can't properly mourn your loved ones as we used to be able to is just, that just sucks. That's really unfair. Like, just unfair. Like, we have to do it. And I forgot where exactly I was going with that, but like, that's what the Christian lifestyle provides, is this dose of reality, and no one is exempt from a dose of reality right now. We're all having to deal with suffering on any level. And I think the worst thing is the softest thing that everyone has to deal with right now is solitude and being alone. And there's a lot of good things that can come from that if you use it wisely.
Yeah, we're all kind of laid bare naked in front of this disease because we don't really know how to stop it. We have no individual power, and so we're kind of powerless and helpless. But that feeling of you're flat on your back, you're exposed, it can also redirect your attention to God, And so this virus is just left and right smashing the idols that we had in our life. All the things we did that distracted us from truly being in touch with our Creator, all those things are being smashed to pieces. So some people, your reaction to that is, I'm going to stay at my house and I'm just going to make some other idols really quickly here. I'm going to busy myself by finding other idols. Sure, these big ones are smashed, but I'll find other ones. Whereas like proper mourning, proper grief, proper reaction to this tragedy would not to be to continue to try to make idols, but instead to, be in touch with the one whom you were meant to idolize.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting that we hit on that, and escapism and grief, in the fact that a proper way to react to what's going on right now is to grieve at whatever capacity, is to mourn, and then to take that to the Lord and just like lay that in front of Him, and then next is to like accept His will, and in trusting that although you don't know what that is, that it will be done for good. And that's hard to do. That's really hard to do. But I think when we kind of like focus back onto this film, it was really interesting, kind of how Kevin pointed out, that grief factor, that Matt Damon's character didn't really grieve until the very end, and how that really wasn't a big part of the film. Again, they focused on CDC members for the most of it, but there was even, what's her name? Kate Winslet? Is that actress's name?
Yeah.
Is that Kate Winslet?
Yeah.
Her character, she was on the front lines and ended up croaking, ended up dying.
Yeah, she had connections to the most powerful people in the CDC, yet ultimately they were completely powerless to help treat her.
And that's just the way this goes. Grieving and mourning. Obviously Laurence Fishburne's character probably didn't expect a close to home impact for him being the head of CDC, but given that one of his close coworkers passed from this, it proved that no one is exempt from grief. And so grief is something that comes and it hits all of us. but we have the choice to mourn about it, and it's about where we direct that mourning. So I guess kind of in wrapping up this, I'm trying to think through this. Is there something we could suggest for any of those that are watching, Christian or non-Christian? What can we suggest that they use their time for now, or different habits that they can form to better grief and better mourn the situation?
I think now it's easier than ever to cut out distraction from your life and try to find some time where you have no distractions, and you can, if meditation is what you like to use to kind of empty your mind, clear your head, and that can be a great way to get to this headspace, get to this state of mind where you can get in touch with the one who created you. If you're feeling very anxious, if you're feeling very vulnerable in this time, then communicating with your creator, the one who made you, is going to be that's going to be the best possible cure. And it's something I've been trying to do in times of like pure anxiety. If the one who created you, like, that's going to be the best cure. Like, some drugs and some distractions can make you, they can be some temporary fixes. And I don't mean to say those are bad things, but this is just a great time to cut out distractions. And doesn't mean you have to develop this deep theology about the personhood of Christ and the deity of Christ and all those complex things, but instead just try to communicate with the one who created you. That would be my best suggestion, because it's easier now than ever, especially in times of extreme stress and vulnerability.
I totally agree with that. And I think on top of all that, something I would suggest is to create the space for that communicating, to create the space for these different things. You have to let go of your previous distractions, whether it was drugs, video games, all these other things. If that's what you use to cope in this time, so be it. If that's what kind of floats your boat for now, then that's what does. But I think creating a space where you have 30 minutes a day, and before this whole thing came about, I didn't even do this well. But I've seen how, in something that Luke, you mentioned kind of last time, was what if we spent 30 minutes to an hour every day in solitude, in prayer, focusing on the Lord, trying to communicate with God, or your God, whoever, and just really rest in that, in silence, in peace, and so that there's this little part of your day where you are at peace, or at least you're quiet and your mind is clear. I think that's a big key that a lot of people miss out on.
Yeah, if you're looking for escape, then escaping to the place and the your creator, escaping to being in presence with them is the best place to escape to, and it better prepares you when you are in this world, and now, as we talked about last week, now is a better time than any before. And so, like, if someone's like, I don't know how to pray, my favorite thing to get started for praying is meditation is a great way to like start to get into it. So if you're ever into meditation, start doing that. And then I call it a 5-2-3, 5-23. I just pray to God. I just say 5 things I'm thankful for. It can be as simple as my spouse, my mother, my child, and you can make that as quick, as short as you want. 5 things you're thankful for, because thankfulness is the antidote to anxiety. If you're being thankful, it's the opposite of being anxious. 2 is ask God for 2 things that you'd like to have. Just ask God for them, because he's a real God who really answers prayers. And then pray for 3 other people in your life. Just pray for things that God can give them. So that's just a very simple template to either introduce yourself to prayer, or if you find yourself I've been praying for a long time, but I don't know what to do with prayer, because it's like, where do I go? That's a very simple way to start.
I mean, Luke, I've actually like promoted that with other people, and obviously sourced you as the author of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really powerful and easy way to step into prayer, because prayer is like, dear God, amen. It's like it can be really easy, but I think that the way that you describe it makes it it seems really easy, but it can be hard, I guess is what I'm getting at. And so the way that you have it is a good template and a good practice for doing that. And so um, yeah, I don't really have any more comments. Do you have anything else you want to add?
The third member of our chum crew, Kevin, had an unexpected chore to run with his daughter.
Yes.
So he had to bounce a little bit, but yeah, so we'll be back next week.
Yeah, we're unsure what we're going to talk about, but we'll let you guys know. So this is the Chums. 2/3 of the Chums out.
Peace.